amended manifest in the amount of $84,112.97.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Was it? Your pay was screwed up, mine was screwed up, Leo's was screwed up.
Oh, I guess. So is there anything else? Cause that was $4,000 more.
Yeah.
And Elaine's
Elaine's was messed up and then Bill Rabel's didn't total out right, so.
That's adjusted now.
Doing what?
I don't know, on the old one. So, I don't know, $45 or something, and then it should have been 300 and something, so. Why it didn't total it up, I don't know.
Probably missed one of your time sheets to put in the hours, because I know your manifests that would go through the time sheet, and that's how Michelle does some time sheets, but she could probably tell you a little more. But
Yeah, but on the old manifest, all the numbers were the same, going down, but the total.
It didn't total up.
It didn't total up right. Instead of totaling up to 3 something, it only totaled up to 45.
That's an Excel issue.
An extra?
Deposit a $30,000 check in the bank. For each need. Little something.
Oh, yeah.
Don't need 30.
Dan,
Morning, how are you?
good. All right. Discuss the town repeater. Yeah. She just delivering it.
Yeah, that's
We'll start out with a discussion of the repeater.
Okay.
Now, the other night, it was kind of a surprise to Joe that he didn't know anything about the repeater. He said the police could use it. But he's saying they have their own TAC channel that they can use.
So we do currently have a town TAC channel. It is not repeated in the middle, so it is line of sight, unit to unit communication. That was something when I started, we already had the frequencies, so we instituted that, we shared it with them, and that's how we communicate currently. As soon as you put any kind of terrain between each radio, you can't talk anymore. So if you put one on each side of the mountain, or even one end of 153 to the other, you're too far at that point and the radios won't talk. So that's currently what we are all using. The repeater in the middle is the device that would allow us to talk both sides of the mountain, one end of town to the other, the whole 9 yards. Not connected to Carroll County, has nothing to do with being dispatched, has nothing to do with us getting emergency calls. That's not the point of this at all. This is for us in town, all of our town services to communicate amongst each other during a storm, during a fire, during a big event, whatever that might be. Police, fire, ambulance, maybe a road contractor, you know, who knows, future expansion. If code enforcement's out doing stuff, you know, they could have the ability to communicate and could turn the radio in the office back on. So the communication can happen throughout the entire town. I'm going to go through David's questions if you're okay with that, and I'll answer.
Yeah.
David sent some questions over. So the first one covers just that. His note said that the repeater does support the police. It is correct. It does. All of our radios do digital and analog all in one unit. So it doesn't matter, you know, that they use digital, we use analog. All of our radios do both. So that's not a factor in this repeater at all. Like I said, it can be shared with whoever we want to share it with. It can be shared with the towns around us, things like that. And this is a norm. It's most of the other towns around us, you know, Freedom, the town of Ossipee has a repeater channel, the town of Tamworth has a repeater channel for these exact reasons. It just communication is key. You know, the cell phone communication, it works somewhere, but not everywhere. You know, the 153 corridor is a constant struggle for us. Anytime we're over there, I mean, you live there, you know.
Yeah.
And the other big issue we have is as soon as we lose power at the fire station, the internet goes with it. The generator comes on and the equipment's powered up, but we lose our actual outside internet connection from Spectrum. Do you lose yours like that too?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just us, but That leaves us sitting at the fire station with nothing but a radio in Carroll County. That's our only method of communication. We can't talk to trucks that are out. We can't coordinate with anybody that's out. We can't find the police. We can't do anything because we can't use our phones. The landlines work through the internet, so those don't work. We have nothing. We're in the dark. So the repeater is this item in the middle to allow us to communicate, to allow us to coordinate, to allow me as a chief to find out what my guys are doing out in the field. You know, can you go check this road? Can you go check that road? Whatever the case. You know, my preference would be I would love to give one of my old portables to the highway contractor so that I can pick that up and I can talk to him directly when he's out and about in the middle of a storm and say, hey, we're over on Townhouse Road, we need help. Come on over. You know, we always try the phone bounce game, and you and I have communicated about that in the middle of storms a couple of times where, yeah, I can't get him either. Give him a radio. Now we can talk throughout town. You know, even if he goes back to Ospey to pick up fuel or whatever, the repeater would work. He can still talk back and forth with us. So that's kind of the basis of the whole project.
Is there a battery backup on that repeater or?
We would install a battery backup. It wouldn't be, you know, it's not going to make it last forever. Our contingency plan, and I already kind of talked to Chuck about it, is basically once the power goes out, we've got a portable generator. We're going to run over there and we're going to plug it in with an extension cord. The hardware will be located in the closet, the electrical closet downstairs, right in the foyer. So we just run an extension cord in and plug it into a generator and power it by a generator.
The meeting with the electrician at 3 o'clock today.
Yeah. So long-term goals, you know, someday a generator in the library would be ideal. Having that as a second place to shelter people would be ideal. We've seen just about every storm. Anybody that lives on this side of the mountain gets trapped. You know, you can't get from one side to the other. Townhouse Road gets closed, 153 gets closed. All of our routes across town get closed. So that's a long-term goal. It's not relevant to this project, but communication is the project here, and trying to get us to be able to work safely and efficiently throughout the town. Mr. Fuller signed off on the placement of the repeater. So Chuck and I communicated. My fault for not sharing the pictures with you guys as well. I shared them with Chuck and kind of got his initial thumbs up and thought we were good from there. I should have shared that photo with you, so I do apologize for that. You guys all have the photo now. I'm working on the additional diagram Chuck needs. He is going to send that to L-Chip just to get a final heads up. But as you saw, I mean, you can't even see the thing up there, so he doesn't expect any problems with it being up there.
I mean, it was part of it was the gray area. I don't think I was the only one who was unsure exactly. Because at one point in time, you said something about a mast, you know, the antenna.
Okay.
So I'm visualizing like we put on the stations and stuff like that, which is like 10 or 12 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not gonna fit inside of the cupola.
No, there's no way.
So, and at one point in time, there was a description, I don't know if it was by Chuck or who it was, of like these half moon flat antenna array things that were gonna mount. So it was just the gray area was you know, part of the delay.
Yeah, no, it's just like you saw in the photo, it's that piece of white, it looks like PVC.
Yep.
Thin PVC. That's all it is. The cable would come out at the bottom on a 90 and go down through the channeling they're gonna run.
Tubes up.
Yeah, so the cable will come down through that, it'll go down to the closet, plug into the hardware, and that's the unit.
That's 240 or is that
I believe that's a 120.
120?
I'll verify that before I leave today, though.
All right. I think it's a Bell China 240.
Yeah, I believe it's just a 120, but I will verify that. And his last question was testing the reception. I think we did talk about that the other night, but I did go up there with a portable, and I had actually Tyler Eldridge over on Pine River Road, and from standing in the bell tower on that line of sight channel, I was able to talk to him from there. This portable puts out 5 watts of power. The repeater will put out approximately 50. So if I can do it on 5 watts, I better be able to do it on 50. So without paying for any kind of formal testing, that was my kind of informal, if it works that way, the repeater's going to work. So that was my testing.
I have another, it's just a matter of fact question. I'm just gonna ask you, have
Yep.
you already started purchasing some of this equipment?
Negative. None of it has been
promises to anybody for this equipment.
negative.
'Cause the only reason, let me ask you why I ask you that, is because you made the statement the other night, you felt we were good to go, and you also told us that when Lenny asked about Friday, you were at OME, so I just wanted to ask you if there's.
No, that was all, that was relevant to the antennas we put on the fire station. We approved those several months ago. They finally all came in. I needed connectors for the end of the antennas and things like that. So that was my trip to OME.
So would this repeater be coming from OME too?
Parts would, I don't know if you've ever heard of John Kenny, but he's a communications guy in the area. He's actually my landlord as well. The Ospey Valley bought a repeater that they intended to use when they did their simulcast project a few years ago. The unit they bought is actually the same one that we got quoted for. So John Kenny is providing that to us instead of OME at a little bit of a discounted cost. So it saved money on the quote that I had originally got.
And what's that cost?
Wish I knew that's what it was.
I want to say it's
19,000.
12, but I'm not comfortable committing to that number without the paperwork in front of me.
So the 19,000.
The remainder is the other parts and pieces. He's only providing the computer part of it. If you look at the box, we still got to buy the antenna and the cable and all that good stuff, lightning arresters and all that stuff that goes in the middle.
And the 19 should be sufficient.
The 19 is still the accurate price. Yes.
Is that including running the electrical cable up?
There wouldn't be any electrical cable going up.
Oh,
It's
that
just the
was
antenna cable.
Wow,
Like a
The
coax cable.
the coax goes all the way up.
gotcha,
The 120 would stay right in that electrical cabinet.
gotcha.
So you only need to power the brick, not the
I
actual.
think Chuck said he had the coax cable from Steve.
So that's what I have.
How many? I don't want to call them spare portables, but do you have any, because you said if, I could take one of my old radios, give it to the road contractor. Do you have another one that could be put here, not to be left on, but in the event that they need?
Of course,
Or
and
could communicate with you
the
guys?
base radio in there does still function. It's powered off. It would need to be reprogrammed, but there is a base radio sitting right next to Caitlin too that would be reprogrammed to have this in it. Yep. So when we talk about an EOC, one of our big problems during any of the storms is, like I said, if I go in one place, I can't talk to anybody else. So I'm always mobile. This would actually allow us to put somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, stationary to keep track of where people are going. One of the big problems we've had with FEMA is all the paperwork after the fact. We have to go back and recreate everything. We're all on the road. We rely on Carroll County. They get swamped. Their times aren't accurate. And we don't have anybody that can keep our own records because we can't station anybody anywhere. Now, if we can communicate to our own person, number one, we're not tying up Carroll County anymore. We can keep our own records, and that makes us successful in that aspect too, the documentation after the fact. So.
You said 19,000 was what, 2 cents?
Well, it's coming out of the unassigned fund balance, so it wouldn't be any tax increase. We were able
Where
to,
did I get the 2 cents from?
that was from
$2,500 and $68 a hundred.
Oh, was it?
$68 a hundred.
I know there was 2 cents somewhere.
No, this one we said was
Take it out.
one that's prime for taking the unassigned fund balance funds, which wouldn't cause any tax increases at all, which was the right thing to do.
I'm good.
Can you get any more questions?
Nope.
Good. I'm good.
I'm good with it. I mean, we just had to have this conversation, and that's the unfortunate thing. It's just like the truck conversation. Having an actual conversation, having a number, having all
Absolutely.
the facts in front of us
Absolutely.
is, what we need to make a, good decision, so. I would like to see, I mean, from my own standpoint, I would like to see if you have the radios and whatever we need to do to get that radio back up and running, if for nothing else.
Yeah,
Let's just say you were over here and something happened on the other side of town, or there wasn't any power over there with this power over here.
Absolutely.
You have internet access here, you could set up over here.
Yep.
Or Dan or.
Absolutely.
anybody else, so.
absolutely. And that's no problem. I've got 3 or 4 extra portables just sitting there that we can do that. We can repurpose one here. So
Actually, probably smart to have the camera and board have one.
I'm fine with that too. There are times where I've tried to get a hold of you too, and that's a struggle. I end up in your driveway.
Yeah, anytime power's out, you gotta go. I was phone.
Yeah, and this repeater, I think the term secret squirrel came up, and that's not an intent here. It's not for us to be, having our little private conversations. It's meant for town business and communicating during town.
Right, but you understand that
So-
I mean, I'm sure Dan's heard that too.
Oh, yeah.
Fire terminology.
Oh, yeah.
That's not meant to be a smart ass slang, it's just.
I just want to be clear that that's not, we're not trying to have a secret that nobody else can hear kind of thing. We just need to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah, we all called, for 100 years, we called it the secret squirrel channel, so.
Absolutely.
And your landlord. County Communications, put West Ospreay's repeater and Osprey Highways Department's repeater. Because we used to, do him favors all the time, so he put them on the Whittier Tower.
Right.
So we had excellent reception. So, because he was always getting stuck and we were always trying to bail him out on Whittier.
Yep.
Then you wanna take a formal vote on that one,
Yeah.
'cause we don't have one for that for the
Yeah.
4901.
Make a motion to approve the. Article for the antenna repeater for the amount of $19,000 to be included in 4901.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Right. Okay, on the bigger and better things. Fire truck.
So I've got a whole bunch of questions from everybody, so if you're good, I'll go over those first, and then if there's anything left, we'll go there.
Yeah.
These are from the questions from David, so can we put verbiage in the contract if we replace the pump prior to the refurbishment, will they subtract that cost? I've sent an email to all 3 vendors, I haven't heard back in this time frame, so. I don't have an answer to that yet, but we've asked for that. These guys aren't shady fly-by-night guys, and I think that's a lot of why they don't put a price per item. Because if they don't need to do something, they skip over it and they go to the next. So if they know the pump has been rebuilt or repaired, they're not gonna do it again. They're not gonna pull it apart again, but we will get that in writing and any further contracts or quotes from them. Does the mutual aid agreement require us to have a pumper? I'm gonna use the terminology tanker. Pumpers and tankers are 2 different things. Pumpers have less water, tankers have more water. Engine 2 is the truck in question. It is our tanker. It carries the most water. Engine 2 is our mutual aid truck. So if any town around us calls us mutual aid, we go with engine 2. It's got the water. It also has the full complement of firefighting tools. So it's dual purpose. Chances are anybody around us, if they're calling us for water. We don't have the surplus of people like some of the other departments do. They're not going to call us for manpower. They're going to call us for water. That's what we do with the truck. So are we required to have one? There's nothing that says we have to, but it puts us in a bad place with our mutual aid partners when we can't provide the only thing anymore. We wouldn't be able to provide manpower, and showing up with 1,000 gallons of water isn't useful to anybody around us. Mutual aid has to be mutual. If we're relying on Ossipee, Freedom, whoever to come over here with water, at some point we got to pay that back. Otherwise, it just becomes providing a service versus mutual aid. So we got to consider that factor in this too. How many times was the tanker needed in 22 and 23? So I wasn't able to get really good data on this. I tried pulling it out of the system and it was a pain trying to get real numbers out of the system. And I also could not specify mutual aid versus in town. So I'm going with rough numbers. I'm saying about 50 times in 2022 and about 35 in 2023. That's basically hand counting from recollection and things like that. And again, I can't differentiate between in town and out of town, but again, most of those responses are out of town. We haven't had a lot of fires in town in 22 or 23. We didn't have any building fires in town, any real building fires in town last year. We didn't have any brush fires because of the wet season we had. So that's one of those things that it's hard to say how many times we're going to use it next year. Well, how many houses are going to burn down next year? Who knows? So hard to give real concrete numbers on that, but the truck does not respond as much as the engines, which is why it's in such good condition being a 20-year-old truck. Statements have been made 15 to 20 years, and then at least 20 years was said at some point as well. That's one of those things too. We can't guarantee. At the end of the day, it's a 20-year-old truck and we can't predict when something's going to fail on it. The work that they're doing is mitigating all the things that they typically see a truck like that fail in, whether that's mitigating rust or mitigating pump issues or U-joint issues or transfer case issues, whatever the case. That's why they pick some of those certain things that they're going to fix. The transfer case, for example, every time we shift that into the PTO, it happens in every fire truck at some point. It gets shifted while it's still in gear and it grinds and everything else. In a 20-year-old truck, that's something we replace because it's one of those things that it will eventually fail. We might as well get ahead of it while the truck's already apart. With that being said, can you put a concrete number on how many years we're going to get out of the truck? No, I wouldn't feel comfortable locking in. 15 to 20 is the range I've been given by all 3 vendors. So somewhere in that range, 15 to 20 years out of the truck. So, I mean, you figure another 20 years now, it's a 40-year-old truck. How many 40-year-old fire trucks do you see on the road these days? Hard to say. Minimal response, taken care of. We do this work now and get ahead of any rust and stuff like that.
There's another 15, 20 years stations.
Exactly. And again, we're talking about at a minimum $750,000 to get a truck and 3 years to get a truck. So
That's for a tanker.
if you're looking for a new one, yeah. So hard to put a real concrete number on that, but 15 to 20 is the range that I feel
Yeah,
comfortable.
that's perfect what you said. If someone asks a question, JT, at least now the 3 vendors say that's the best guess
Right.
for the work that we're getting. That's fine, just as long as we have something.
I had talked a little bit about water in Tuesday night's meeting and losing the water. So engine 1 is a 1,000-gallon engine. That's the engine that's at station 2. Engine 3 is the little mini pumper. That's a 400-gallon engine. That does have a compressed air foam system. The board at the time was sold on this being the latest and greatest, biggest thing. Compressed air foam is a very difficult topic. For a big, busy department that operates that every day, they're fantastic. Big cities, stuff like that, it increases their water. They're proficient with operating it. The problem is you're introducing air and foam into water and bringing it into a burning building. What happens when you blow air into a burning building? You feed a fire. If somebody is not operating that 100% correctly and has ratios off or anything like that, there is a lot of risk with using that system as well. Operators have to be very proficient in the use of that truck. And with our limited use, yes, we train on it, but how proficient are our operators on that truck? It is there. It is great in theory. It is usable when the truck's in service. That's the other factor. When you look at the pump, typically with a pump, we can drain the water out of it. So in the winter, when we're out in super cold weather, we can drain the water out of the pump, or we can keep water circulating through the pump. Either way, it prevents it from freezing up. We found out during our cold snap that this has coolers that are part of the foam system that water sits in. There's no mechanism to drain that water. It just sits there and there's no circulating. The pump doesn't change that. Nothing changes that. The only thing we could do is tear the thing apart and put some drains in, which we probably will look at doing at some point. That water freezes. That's what caused our catastrophic pump failure last year. Those coolers all froze up, they cracked, and then they started leaking water everywhere. We ended up with half a tank of water on the truck in the bay because the rest of it was on the floor, leaked out of the crack in the coolers. Coolers have since been replaced, but the next time it goes out and super cold, it's gonna freeze again. It hasn't been fixed to fix the problem. It's just been fixed so that it functions again. So with that being said, engine 3 is its whole own bucket of issues. Yes, it can increase the water, but not reliably. As far as I'm concerned, that has 400 gallons of water on it, and I would never count it as having more than that because again, I can't rely on the truck. And that's based on what we've seen so far. So with that being said, engine 2, the truck in question, has 3,000 gallons of water. Obviously, that's vastly different from the other two. That's why it's the water truck. That's why it's our preference for bringing to a fire, because we have that water power. Typically, if we pull a hand line, we're flowing 150 gallons per minute. So do the math. We show up with engine 1, we got about 6 minutes of water time before we're done. And in 6 minutes, let's talk ideal situation. We've got a duty crew in the station, they're out the door immediately. They get on scene and they start fighting fire. They got 6 minutes to put a fire out. And then they're out of water. And then they're dead in the water, waiting for mutual aid to show up. Mutual aid's not going to be there in 6 minutes. Puts us in a bind. Engine 3, 400 gallons of water. How long is that going to last? But then you talk about the tanker with 3,000 gallons of water. We've now got quite a bit of firefighting time, enough to let mutual aid get there. That's why that water is so important. And that's why it does create a risk not having the water. So that's my justification for needing to have engine 2 and its water. Especially in a town where we don't have the hydrants readily available. Yes, we have dry hydrants, but that's a whole nother process to get water out of them. It's not as simple as running a hose over and just grabbing water out of a pressure hydrant. Only on Lexus, the high bidder has warranty information in their estimates. Do the other two provide warranties? To my knowledge, they do, and you're right, they don't document any of that. So that's another question. I sent an email to them. What is your warranty? Send us the details of that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, they all provide.
Detail, if you pick one of the other ones, you get that detail.
Right. They all provide a workmanship warranty. It's just a matter of getting those terms laid out before we sign anything, of course. Under the Autotronics quote, they have a stipulation that if the pump fails, we'll be contacted. They do also have a price quote in there for a brand new pump, which is 75,000. So if the pump is junk and needs to be thrown away, it's a $75,000 item to replace. The pump is not junk. The pump is not going to need to be thrown away. It needs to be rebuilt. The valves need to be replaced. There's an expense there. I'm going to say probably somewhere around $10,000 to redo it and get it done right. You know, have it refreshed and good for another 15 to 20 years. In the meantime, can we replace some valves and get by with the pump in its present condition? Yeah, I think we can. But if we're going to look at keeping the truck for 15 to 20 years, it makes sense if we're going to do it, to do it.
And that sentence was basically, they said. Under that, it said, test the pump, it failed, you will be contacted. And then it had another bullet underneath, rebuild pump. And like, they were gonna recharge you to rebuild the pump, so you may wanna get clarification if you pick that vendor.
Yeah.
Because his bid had everything listed in the bid. And then all of a sudden, you come to the pump and it says, you're gonna be contacted if it fails. And then he had a bullet of rebuild the pump, is he gonna charge you more than that estimate?
Right, so that's kind of the way I read that too. It's like, this is a cost. Without the rebuild, we're gonna test it. If it has to be rebuilt, there's gonna be additional cost. Excuse me, on top of that quote.
I will clarify that based on verbal conversations. The intent was they're going to pull the pump apart to rebuild it. And like I said, God forbid, when they pull that apart, they say, nope, no good, junk, throw it away. They would contact us and say, what do you want to do? That's verbally what I was understanding. The actual rebuild was built into the cost from my understanding.
So they may
They need
be
to
thinking
clarify.
about when you pull it apart, do you wanna do the rebuild or do you wanna do that upgrade to the big one?
Right.
The $75,000 one. I took it both ways, but I just wanted
Their
to
verbiage
highlight
is not
that for
clear.
you to say, let's get that clarified. You don't wanna get hit with another $70,000 when you didn't have to.
Correct.
And from my standpoint, just me is, I would say, okay, you three. I want worst case scenario. Pump needs to be rebuilt, transfer case needs to be renewed. Worst case scenario on everything, give me your quote.
Yep.
And then across the board, then we're looking at actual apples to apples, not apples, oranges, grapes.
Right.
And there's not the questionable up in the air thing.
Yeah. So the comment I made on Tuesday as well, I'm asking for 250 to be our budget, even though the quote was less than that. And that's where I said we have the list of equipment we want to put on the truck. Obviously, we want to replace things like nozzles that are 20 years old and ready to be replaced. Yeah, really, they came from other trucks, so they're not even new with the current truck. They're from trucks prior.
Those nozzles haven't been made since the 90s.
So with that being said, we want to replace that stuff. But if we get to a point where they call us and say, the pump has to be replaced, you need to come up with this money. Obviously, the equipment's gonna fall aside and we're gonna replace what we need to replace on the truck. Again, based on what I've seen, based on me operating the pump, I'm sure Dan would agree. I don't see us needing to replace a pump. I don't see it. I think we have leaky valves. I think we have a leaky packing, which are both addressed in the rebuild. And with those, it should, in theory, pass the pump test.
If I can, when that pump and the valves are tight, I'll take that truck over any other truck out there any day of the week. When a very seasoned academy instructor is on the pump panel with me years ago, and I'm doing something that the books say you shouldn't be able to do, and he's surprised at what that truck can do, that says a lot about that truck. So that pump, like I said, when it's tight, I'll take that truck all day, twice a month.
It needs its preventative repairs after being 20 years old. And that's what I see with my experience with the pump, and that speaks to exactly what I've seen. So worst case scenario, we know the number, we know what it's going to cost, and I don't see it getting to that point, but we know the number at least. Two of them put under the optional items repainting the cab of the truck. Their big concern with that is the paint on the entire truck is 20 years old. So obviously it's going to be faded to a point. Again, the truck doesn't have a ton of hours on it. It's not been sitting out in the sun baking. It's not overly faded. So it is an optional item. Their concern was they are going to repaint the body based on all the rust repair and things they're going to do. They have to repaint that. They were concerned that there might be a little bit of difference in the cab color versus the body color. It's optional. I can live with a nice truck that's serviceable for the next 20 years. That's a little bit different in color between the body and the cab. So,
They ought to be able to blend the paint to make it.
right, at least close, yeah,
Yeah, the point of that is so you knew that those two vendors didn't include it and the big price vendor did include it.
yeah.
I just wanted to highlight it to you.
And I think that probably stems from our verbal conversation when they came to look at the truck and I said exactly what I just said. I'll live with a little bit of difference in paint color versus paying whatever it was,
So you know what
$20,000.
you're getting if you pick one of the other two.
And honestly, with what we're talking about doing, the cab and the body's got enough separation that they're not gonna be side by side. They'll never, as long as they get pretty close with the body paint.
It's gonna take a very good eye to
Yeah.
see the difference in color. And again, it's not like your car that sits out in the sun all day and fades naturally. It's inside.
You're not doing it on a parade anyhow.
Right, like it's not,
As
yeah,
long as the truck can haul water and pump, I don't care what the paint
Right.
mismatch, slight difference looks like.
so as far as I'm concerned, I have no consideration of paying the cab, even if we have leftover money, that it's a waste in my opinion. Dingy and Autotronics do not have a disclaimer that their estimate is only good for a certain amount of days, whereas Alexis does. Did they give you a verbal time frame? They did not, and that's another item that I asked them to specify. And that comes back to our whole question about if they're not taking the truck to 25, are they gonna come back and say, oh, it costs this much now? They need to specify.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know they're all waiting for them.
Yeah.
Oh, yours got mail.
Okay.
We're still put it in the mail on our way out.
I'll get it in a few weeks.
Just kidding. Here you go. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.
No worries.
So that whole question about cost, I've asked them to clarify as well. And again, that needs to be in writing before we look to sign any kind of a contract. And then timeframes, Autotronics said they won't start till March of 25. Each company kind of gave a verbal, we could probably take it at some point towards the end of 24, early 25. None of them will lock down. The way this is, it's basically a line. And when you sign the contract, they put you in line. When they finish the one in front of you, you're up. Whatever time frame that takes is whatever time frame that takes, and most of them will not lock down to a specific date because of that. Now, my concern that I don't think I made clear the other night, they're not going to start it till 2025, so we'll wait to sign the contract until 25. Well, we're just going to end up in line at 25, and then they're not going to take it till 27. So no matter how long we wait to actually get a contract in, is just where they're going to put us in line. So if 10 people sign ahead of us between now and then, we got 10 more trucks to wait for. So it's going to be a constantly rolling thing where the timeframes are just going to get longer and longer. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's figured out it's a lot cheaper to refurb a truck than to buy a new one. So I would expect to see over the next couple of years, this is what people are going to do.
Mhm.
So again, timeframes are going to get longer. Like I was talking about with the ambulance staffing, I'm sure they're in the same boat. Minimum staffing and everything else. Equipment is not readily available. They said if we do need to buy a new pump, the new pump itself would probably be a year out. So you figure all that stuff into it, you can't really judge a good time frame. That's why my opinion is if we can lock into a vendor and get into the mix, the sooner the better. We'll be in line and ready to go, but we still have time to get the funding taken care of. With the allocations David set up, we're gonna have more than the 250 in the account by the time we need to pay. Assuming everything goes through a town meeting. So
Your question with the pump, let's say you said it's a year out, you have to get a new pump, so they're not gonna know until they get the truck and take it.
correct,
So it'll be 2 years without the truck.
could potentially,
Or
and that would be a
go back-
situation.
When you go back, we just keep the old
I would guess that the first thing they would do is tear that pump apart, knowing that that could be their failure point. And if they say it needs a new pump, they're gonna put it back together and say, come get the truck, we're gonna order your pump, and when we get the pump in, we'll take you back. That would be my guess. I don't know that for sure.
Is the pump easy access to remove and back in place?
Relatively,
So they can rebuild the truck and still.
basically, if we go out and look, I could show you, but basically that center section of the truck, the whole thing lifts off
Right.
and it gives you access to the whole pump channel.
Yeah.
So it is relatively easy
Yeah, so
to,
they could redo the whole truck and then come back later and put the pump in, they do something.
Right.
Need to.
correct.
Okay.
All right, and then Leo's questions. So mileage on the truck, the truck has 20,555 miles. It has 1,478 engine hours and it has 304 pump hours. Again, we're not running it like we are the regular engine, so it's not out as much, so the mileage is lower. And that's why this truck is in such a good condition. We're not looking at replacing it. We're not looking at putting a new chassis under it. We don't need to. It's in good shape and it's pre-emissions. So I'm sure you can relate to the pre-emission stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want
keep out of that. We need to keep out of that.
And again, you asked in the last 2 years how many times it was used, so the rough numbers I came up with were all I could get. The cost to replace the pump, we talked about that, 75 to get a new one, probably somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to repack it, refurb it the way we want. And you asked about the diamond plate and things like that, so verbally, their intent was to pull all the diamond plate off, clean it, polish it, and whatever salvageable will go back on the truck. There is some that has some corrosion and things like that they won't be able to replace. I believe that it's aluminum. We're honestly not 100% sure. We believe it's aluminum diamond plate right now.
Okay, I can tell. I
Yeah,
can tell what it overlays.
yeah,
The back is definitely aluminum because you can see where the holes, we're missing a couple of screws that have fallen out over the years. That it's aluminum for sure because you can't get a screw to hold into it and it's walled out. The back diamond plate, and it's covered in several of those quotes, is coming off completely, and then they're going to put the smooth on, or the chevrons, the safety chevrons.
Okay,
But everything else, as Chief said,
so the diamond plate is painted.
no.
no, they're gonna put, have you ever seen the chevrons? They're kind of like this with the reflective colors. They're gonna add that to the truck. It doesn't currently have that.
Got it.
So the actual backside of the truck will become a smooth metal versus the diamond plate so that they can stick that stuff to it.
Yeah, which you really don't need diamond plates in it.
Exactly. So they'll reuse what they can. Some of it will have to be replaced. That's figured into the cost.
Okay.
If for some reason it became excessive, that's when they said they would contact us for what we wanted to do, but you can see looking at the truck, I don't expect it to become excessive. One of the other metal concerns they have, they use like the metal fender guards and things like that. And for some reason that they all said that every time they build trucks, they come up with this new latest and greatest metal combination they're going to use, and they put them together, and then 20 years later they're all starting to corrode against each other. We are seeing some of that in the bottoms of some of the cabinets. So when you open the roll-up door, you can look along the bottom and you can see where the two metals are touching each other and they're corroding. So they're going to mitigate that with whatever's currently working and not corroding against each other. Definitely not an expert on that stuff, but
Anyway,
they know what they're trying to fix, so I'll take their word for it. Different quotes for lights. That's basically, we did ask for the same vendor. We did go with Wheelan, which is that's the primary that most people use these days. They have the best warranty, they have the best reputation. We said we want more lights here, we want more lights here, we want more lights here, and then let them choose what they wanted to put where. That's kind of their expertise and whatever they deal with the most. So like Alexis, for example, has rub rails that go down the side that have little lights built into them. So they figured that in. The other vendors don't do that. So they put a wheeling light in there instead. So it varies from vendor to vendor like that.
so how much of a price range does it vary from vendor to vendor? I mean, some vendor might put all this options on, the other one just what you needed.
So based on what I read through there, they added the lights where we wanted, but none of them were using like more lights than we requested or anything like that. So you're going to end up with the same amount of light. And of course they don't list out the individual prices. So we don't know exactly what each item is costing, but based on the knowledge.
Looking more at
Yeah.
they were able to.
So on the quote, are they roughly like is it Alexis?
Yeah.
Alexis.
Alexis.
So let's just say that they quoted in their quote, the light package is $50,000 and one's 42 and one's 48.
They didn't give prices for just the light package. None of the quotes are itemized.
So
It's just a bottom line.
and again, that's going back to my earlier statement where we want worst case scenario and there's this, and what's your price?
Right.
And
The categories basically.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm using.
Even if they could get into, the pump section's gonna cost this, the body section's gonna cost.
It would help us a lot if they just break down, put a cost associated to each
Yep.
category.
I get that. I do get that.
And I'm assuming that Glenn is the one that came and looked at the truck for Alexis, right?
No, it was a rep that actually flew in from Alexis that looked at the truck.
Even though Glenn deals with.
Glenn will do the paperwork, so we will deal with him as far as, payment, paperwork. And I believe some of the service will be done with Glenn, if we have a problem with the truck, small stuff he can do. But any major, if we had a major failure after we get the truck back, it has to go back to Illinois.
Where does it go right now?
Right now, Glenn does all the work on all of our apparatus.
And where did that truck come from?
Glenn, ultimately,
That's what I
it's
thought.
a Central States back when he used to deal those.
Central Mistake.
Yes, exactly. So with that being said, I can ask them to redo the quotes. And your next bullet goes kind of right along those lines of things aren't itemized, but my intent with this, looking at the purchasing policy, if we approve the funding, we're probably gonna have to put this out to bid anyway. Based on the purchasing policy, we're gonna have to do like an RFP type of situation. My intent with these quotes was to get our ballparks, and we've got 3 vendors to look at, so we kind of know the range of price. I wasn't expecting us to come up and say, all right, we're gonna lock in with this specific vendor. My thought would be we go back with our RFP, we kind of know the package we want, and that's where we send it back to these people and say, this is exactly the detail we want to see. Now give us your numbers. What changed?
For each category.
Right.
Okay.
But that does make it difficult for us and to answer to the budget committee of where this money's going.
Correct.
Why $250,000?
And that would,
Especially when you get a quote, when you have one conversation and it's like, well, they didn't include the pump, they didn't, there's this, whatever, and it's around 160, well, that's 200, that's $100,000 difference roughly.
Right.
And what we're asking for, so you're trying to sell this when, we're talking about 2 cents. You heard that conversation early on, where was the 2 cents? 2 pennies on the tax rate, when we're going down to the pennies. That try to answer the $250,000, you wanna tell them exactly, am I wrong, David?
Well, the way I know what you mean, Chris, but the way I looked at, you could frame this, because I didn't realize at first when we discussed that. You gotta lock this in order to get the truck into place, and that's why I said, what do you guys really envision you wanna do with this? Do you wanna let it keep going the way it is? Do you wanna go for a new one, a used one? Refurb, I think refurb, in my opinion, for what JT's doing is the best bet, but
We agree.
you approve an amount not to exceed a certain amount, and it's based on, and that's how you word your warrant article, and you can see I've got some verbiage in that article in front of you, not to exceed, and it comes from the capital reserve fund. That way there, when it comes in with the itemized bill, you can pick which one you want. Doesn't mean that you're gonna spend $250, you may only spend $180. At any point, like the chief said about, and Dan, that they had extra stuff on the truck that they wanted to replace. Even if you only approve just that estimate, they still can go in and request from the capital reserve fund the nozzle replacements. That money's in there to do that. So I don't, as long as you word your warrant article not to exceed, and you're coming from the capital reserve fund, so it's not gonna increase the taxes. So we know that. We're gonna take it out of the capital reserve fund. Now, that leaves another issue on the capital reserve fund, because right now with the injection we're putting in this year, if it's approved at town meeting, it'd be $255,900 total after March meeting if it's approved. Understandable, you're not doing this till March of 25, so minimum we'd be putting in also, and then is at least 20,000 more. So that's 75. So we'll leave him at least 25, even if you went up to the 250. You'd at least have 25 in there to start. Which is kind of low, but I mean, you got a refurb truck that's 15 to 20 years, which is, to me, we're gonna have to do something with that pumper sooner or later, one way or another. And then, I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, I think that we don't have to worry about the 2 cents because it's coming out of the capital reserve. We need to worry more.
You
about-
missed one, so.
Yeah, no, but we need to worry more, Chris, about what do we really want? Do we want to take this much money out of the capital reserve fund for a refurb truck? To me, that's what I wrestled with. Did we want to take this much money out of the capital reserve for a refurb truck?
My 2 cents reference was, we're right down to talking about and negotiating and justifying the 2 cents. So now we're talking about $250,000. I wasn't saying that the 2 cents was part of this or anything.
even though the money's
Oh, no.
there, sort of justifying it.
So I didn't mean it, but we're watching the budget is what I meant to say that by you saying that.
Yeah.
The other item I'm gonna ask them to talk about is an escape clause, so, if we decide to move forward with this and somehow funding falls through or whatever. If we sign that contract, can we say, yeah, forget it, we're all set? So I'll ask them to add something. How we would get out of the contract once it's signed.
If I can jump in here, so I totally understand what the three of you are saying about specs and so on and so forth. So when we started looking at vendors, I basically sent them a very generic laundry list. I'm looking for 10 pairs of socks, 5 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of jeans, and 3 t-shirts. What do you have? So at that point, now we're getting, well, we've got Hanes, and this one's got Fruit of the Loom, and so on and so forth. So we can kind of decide which direction we want to head. So like the chief is saying, yeah, we're going to need to probably do an RFP. That's where we're going to be able to nail down our specs. You know, this is what we want to do. Update your quote to reflect that. And then we'll be able to do that full apple to apple comparison, where now we're kind of looking at, yeah, we're looking at apples to apples, but we're looking at Fiji versus, you know, the grannies. So it's, I think we'll be able to narrow it down.
There's a key right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, we needed to start somewhere, which is where we're at now.
And the other,
And for us, from a budgetary standpoint, and for me, we wanted to make sure we weren't Fruit of the Loom, Hanes, Calvin Klein.
Yeah, absolutely. And
You know what
I
I'm saying?
totally understand that.
So, cause if we, you know, if we have champagne taste, but we only have a beer budget,
right,
we gotta stick within our parameters, so
Yeah.
that's tighten everything up, and what are we gonna have? I mean, just like you were saying with the, you know, Lexus puts that, you know, the rubber rail on it with the lights in it, and you know, that's the difference between Mercedes-Benz and Hyundai, you know, and it's.
yes,
From a safety standpoint, though, I will 100% tell you that the night of the fatal motorcycle accident, we had engine 2 out there blocking 25 at the blinking light. I came from home. If I did not know that truck, I would have sworn you could have driven right down the middle of it.
there's no warning, there's a
one light.
blank spot, so it's pitch black out, of course.
Yeah.
And there's an area where there's no warning lights at all, so it almost, to the blind eye, it almost looks like, oh, there's 2 trucks here, I could drive through the middle, when in reality, there's one long truck. So that was some of the stuff, the safety stuff that we said, no, we need lights here, we need lights here, all this extra stuff.
And it got to the point where Tyler and I took one of the scene lights off the side and set it in front of the truck, shining on the truck, so that people coming from the east would be able to tell that there was a 38-foot long truck there. So,
So, yeah, right, it's,
so right now, there's one light midship down low that just flashes, and that's it. There's nothing up high, there's nothing in the middle, which is part of the safety upgrade of the light package. So
And there's no cabinets on the side for you to roll up.
we could have, but there's minimal light on the sides, and with everything in there, you're not gonna see a whole
The
ton of
pump
light.
panel area is where it's lacking. So even still, that's further back where there is a couple lights, so it's one of those things, that's where we looked at it, we said, all right, this is where we want you to add some lights, because we've already seen this be an issue. So, you know, it wasn't a matter of, I want this thing to be a Christmas tree, add every light in the world to it, it was strategic of, you know, let's, instead of having the 2 lights in the grill, let's put 4, because let's be honest, the light on the roof, nobody can see because the truck's so tall. Things like that, you know, we've experienced the issues where people don't see the truck coming at them, because the only 2 grill lights are down here, your mirror is here, and the light bar is up here, so you don't see the truck until it's right on top of you. So trying to mitigate some of those issues, and the whole changing the pump panel from being up top to the side mount, that's an issue too. I fell off it last winter, he fell off it last winter. It sucks up and down, up and down, up and down, and thankfully we weren't hurt, but at some point it was a minimal cost to add that. It was one of those things, if they can easily, if they're going to be in there rebuilding the pump anyway, all they're doing is changing some levers to mount off to the side and changing the configuration of the pump house a little bit. It wasn't a massive lift to do. And Dan will tell you, Dan was the one that instigated that whole thing. And I told him from the start, if that's going to be the difference, you know, $10,000, we're not doing it. But because it was reasonable, it's in there. And it's one of those things, keep our guys on the ground so they're not climbing up and down, they're not sliding, they're not slipping, they're not falling off the truck, all that good stuff.
When that truck was new 20 years ago, I would have to imagine I wasn't around then here. The way it was set up was probably the right way to set it up. Back then, everybody was putting out portable ponds, you were pulling up beside it, you were jumping out the side, you were moving on. I can tell you right now that the way the Osprey Valley has been working the last 5+ years, is now everybody's dropping that rural hitch at the end of the driveway and we're expected to pump into it. So me as an operator, I have to put the pump in gear, I have to get down, I have to hook up at the ground level, then climb up, pull some levers, get back down, make sure everything's all set, and it's up and down the entire time, which clear weather is fine. But tonight, it's not fun. I'd rather make those connections and pull the levers and slip and fall at ground level than 3 feet up, which is the whole purpose for moving into that side configuration.
And you know, when you talk about a bigger department that has a dedicated operator of the truck that's not gonna do anything else, and they get up there and they stay up there. That's great for them, they got a great vantage point and everything else, but when you're talking about our department where him and I are gonna show up alone on that truck together. Guess what, we're gonna throw and pump, we're gonna be working, but then every time we come back to check on it, we gotta climb back up and down and up and down and up and down. It's tough for us to work with that situation, and it's a safety problem when someone falls and cracks their skull open. So that's kind of the basis behind those changes we're making, and you'll see in the quotes, the other thing they're doing is they're rebuilding the steps to get out of the cab. We've fallen down out of the cab too, because the steps to get out of the passenger side are that narrow. And when you're wearing a fire boot that's this wide, a little bit of snow or ice on that, you're going down. So minimal safety issues to keep us a little bit less likely to fall.
Changing the controls to the side, you say it's minimal. Any idea what is minimal?
Without having them break it down, I couldn't say exactly, but
That's what we need to cost.
I had the conversation with the vendors and I said, you know, if they're gonna add $10,000 to the cost or, you know, upwards of that, nix it. And all of them said it's because we have to tear the whole thing apart anyway to get to the pump, to change the pump, to refurb the pump, I should say. We're already in there. It's just changing the linkage from this way to this way. It's not a big lift. If they weren't doing work on the pump, then it would be a big lift because they're already gonna have it apart. It's not.
I know when that truck was ordered, I think they planned that, worked on that for close to a year. And there was some in their department that wanted the 4-man cab, and you know, they tried to convince everybody that no, we need the water.
Yep.
So that's why it's a cab.
Yep.
You have the water, and yeah, they put a lot of hours into specing that truck out.
And that stuff changes. If we were sitting here right now looking at building the new truck, we'd be doing the same thing.
The reason why I'm laughing is he's absolutely right, they spend a copious amount of time, you know. Specking this truck and everything, and then it gets delivered and it doesn't fit in the fire station because the light bar was on the roof.
Modern light bars will fit on it. We did find that out.
So that's why the light bar is the way it is, because they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
After all of that time, then it wouldn't fit in the station.
Yep. That's another factor when we talk about the warning lights, that light bar that's sitting like on the brow of the truck. Half of those lights don't work anymore. The light bar's end of life. They don't sell the parts to fix it anymore. Half of that blinks, half of it doesn't. Sometimes it stays on, sometimes it doesn't. That needs to be replaced too at some point, but it's one of those things. If we're gonna look at this, I'm not gonna put nickels and dimes into it here and there. Rather do the whole thing. My other concern with waiting is, you know, we're already looking at 2025. Let's take this truck another 2 or 3 years down the road, being out in the salt and everything else, more corrosion. Are we eventually gonna get to a point where this is now gonna be cost prohibitive because it's gonna cost so much to get ahead of the rust? We'd be behind the 8 ball at this point. We're getting ahead of it now. So I don't want to get behind that 8 ball and have the truck too bad to be fixed.
I don't think that any one of us or the budget committee felt like that this wasn't the way to go with the refurb and the $250,000. It's apples.
Mhm.
For the one paint and no Calvin Klein.
Or Victoria's Secret person.
I win, nothing else, but.
There's a secret right there, they should have stayed. And so, you know. Apples, and. If we get put on the list, so that we get the ball rolling. When do we have to write that first check, and what budget is it actually coming out of? Is it coming out of 24th budget? So we have to have it on the warrant article for this year. Is it coming out of 25 budget? So it goes on 25 budget.
None of the vendors will take money until they take the truck. Problem with that being is some of them said we might be able to take it in late 24. So if they called us in November or December and said we're ready, it would come out of this year. If they don't call us till March, it'll be next year.
But it's just a initial deposit though, right?
Correct, and it's you pay in segments. It's not a full lump sum. It's you know, you pay a deposit when they take the truck. And I think all 3 of them outlined actual payment terms of when each amount was due.
We have the capital reserve fund money in, so that
Yeah.
There is sufficient of funds in
Right.
there.
Well, that's the one thing that we gotta work out is if this injection of funds don't go into the capital reserve funds isn't approved by the town, you don't have the funds.
And that's where I said we need to have that escape clause. I mean, I guess we wouldn't be
That-
signing a contract
That'd be
before it's
smart,
approved
that
anyway.
doesn't, that does. I mean, you know, you still have to be prepared that you pull this if it doesn't go in. If the town knows on the floor that if you don't pass this, we're gonna end up having to pull the refurb engine too, right? I keep saying-
You got
For some reason, You know, put down 3, I don't know why, I know 3's a minute. But, you know, you'll need that in your mind when you're up there, when we're doing the town meeting, that if for some reason it doesn't get passed, then we have to say, before they do the final vote, if you do that, we're gonna have to pull the engine to rebuild because we won't have sufficient funds to do that. But for far as the budget, Chris, and what year, if they pass it, it doesn't matter. Once that's in there in March of 24. I mean, we've got it at any time they want it.
As long, my only thing was, without looking at that. For that very reason, because we don't have it yet, but as long as that money gets put in there this year. So would it be possible for us to take it out 25's budget? And then we know what happened this year, you know what I'm saying? To make that 250,
Well, you wouldn't take it,
$1,000.
you wouldn't even have to worry about it in 25 because you'd already have it in the capital reserve, so. We'd be just adding to the capital reserve in 25.
I mean, as far as the warrant article goes, that's all.
Yeah. You know,
I don't see it, I think it'll pass.
I don't, the other issue you have to think of is like I stated on. The chief's talking 250. Case of other stuff, he has access to that, so you may not want to go to the 250 on the warrant article. Knowing what his estimates are, that's your choice, I mean, that's what you present to us, but the whole point of that was. If he has nozzles or other equipment, he can go get that at the capital reserve fund at any time he wants, just by asking to get it out of the capital reserve and you guys approving it. So, you know that one is a huge bid, one's a mid bid, and one's a low bid. So. By the verbiage, the draft that I gave you, I mean, that's just. Based on what the chief said, the 250, so are you comfortable with no more than 250? I mean, we know we're gonna have to, after March of 2025, have 25,000 more than likely in the capital reserve. And then that leads me to the one other question that I have for the chief, if I can. That the budget committee, I got asked to give him a question on, was. We knew when Randy stood up for mini pumper. In that town meeting, we all knew Randy said the other truck was going until we got the rollover, we got the insurance, so we're going to a 2 fire truck department like we always had been. And we've always had major problems with the mini pumper. And we still have a problem with the mini pumper. What is the possibility of that mini pumper being put up for sale and put it into the fire truck trust fund for engine 1? Is that a possibility?
I'm not gonna say it's not a possibility, but with the way we're currently configured, I don't think I would support that at the moment. And the reason being is nothing else will fit in station 1. And the majority of our responding membership currently, not talking about day coverage, I'm talking about off duty coming from home, is much closer to station 1. You know, my primary responders are going to get engine 3 from station 1. If I could fit engine 1 up at station 1, I'd be all for getting rid of engine 3.
So that's
But
a
we're not there.
possibility maybe down the road of putting some more funds in for engine 1. Taking anything you can as you can down the road to replace engine 1 or refurb engine 1. I don't know, I guess you could possibly
Yeah, it's nowhere near needed, but when it gets there, yeah. The bigger problem is,
think it was years down the road, I was thinking that the way they gave me the question was, if we're gonna be doing this, why can't we put it up next year for sale? And put
Engine 1 or engine 3?
Engine 3, and put the money back into the trust fund that would, so we wouldn't be down at 25,000. Say we get 100 for the mini pump, and now we're at 125, whatever.
I would have trouble with that again because of the geographical aspect, and the other factor in that too would be our ISO, the insurance services rating. Taking engine 3 out of station 1 could potentially have an impact on insurance as well, because now you have no fire protection in that region.
Well, we had the ISO before we had the mini pumper.
Well, we did, and we were at 910.
It brought us down, or it gave us a better rating when we got engine three.
Yeah.
So that would
Anybody
get
who's
worse.
Anybody who's seen an insurance reduction because of that, I'd like to see them, because I know what I get for the, in response. I mean, I understand that.
Mhm.
I don't think that's.
It's not the end, it's not the end all be all.
Yeah.
But you know, as far as getting a truck on the road in a timely manner, without having something in Lord's Hill, I couldn't support getting rid of that truck.
That gives enough answer to say that, and there's a possibility at some point if you had to, if you could, and that's all the question was to me, so I got an answer for it, that's fine.
We won't be able to discuss this until the tanker's back anyhow.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a question they asked me to ask, and
Mhm.
now.
And the other
bring it up
function
to the budget committee, I could tell them.
with engine three, the other function of that is whenever we have a storm, that's the truck we end up going to get and running because it's got the four-wheel drive. It's, you know, it's got those other things that our trucks don't have, the bigger trucks don't have.
Yeah.
So when you see us out running around in a storm, we're not in the engine or the tanker, we're in engine three with the four-wheel drive. So it does serve a purpose. Unfortunately, it's been a rough road with it, but it does currently serve us a purpose.
So you got a new battery.
We got new batteries, so
And for me to go down to station 2 and get engine 1 and then come back north, that adds minimum of 10 minutes to a response time.
Yeah, and that's a
So,
great,
that's
that's a great
the-
answer, I mean, at least now when they ask, we've got something I can give.
Yeah, that, engine three's been a nightmare, day one, we get sold them.
Yep.
Yeah, bad
The-
worms.
I would have never supported the CAF system. I'll go on the record and say that I would have never supported that CAF system, and I think that was a bill of goods. Like I said, it's great in theory, but we haven't seen the results.
So where's the truck stored for the forest management thing, the big,
That's at station 2.
it's inside there?
Yep, that truck is a rough topic. It's great for certain things. We're gonna go play around in the woods, fantastic.
So you need it.
Yeah, it's the only truck we have that we can get off-road with. Engine 3, we would not take off-road, it's way too heavy, that thing will sink to the axles immediately.
Been there, done that, not me, but
Yeah.
it has been
No
done.
road clearance on that.
No clearance at all. So as far as getting off-road and actually dealing with a woods fire, the forestry serves that purpose, but that's basically the only purpose it serves. In the wintertime, we had that out last year and the brakes are so touchy, the air brakes on that are so touchy. The thing was sliding all over the place and the high center of gravity, it's tippy and it's not a winter truck. Yeah.
I mean, the tires aren't made for.
Yeah.
Winter travel.
Has
So-
it ever been off-road, I mean, up in this area?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. 2022, when we had a decent forest season, it was all over the place. Went up to Wakefield, it went up to Tamworth, we had a couple in town that I went to.
That one does, I don't know where it's at in your plans, but different tires on that one would do wonders for what we can do in the snow.
And do we own that, or is that?
No, that's owned. It's one of the few of that style in the state that came from the federal program, not the state program.
I went with the Iraq war and all that stuff,
So it,
under surpluses.
yeah, we had to have it in service and have it in service for a year, and then the feds sent us the title, so somewhere the title should be here.
If you don't have that, then we should look at that, just to make sure that.
I do not have titles, I don't keep any titles.
Title should be here, I know we have a few. Where they were placed before I came here. I know we have, I don't know what the make and model of a forest truck is. But I do know I have some back there. My plan is to put them in a lock safe place.
But before you do that, make sure we,
So you.
Yeah, I just need to know.
But,
make it-
LMTV.
Up to Stuart Stevenson, either 96 or 97.
well, you should go through the fire department with all, I think you got like 4 or 5 trucks.
If we don't have them, we should look
With
with
your car
this.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'll be into the lock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you happen to
Just sit
see
down
any
with her.
there, please let me know
You
because.
should sit down with her. and
Yeah.
go through it.
I went through the files when you were looking for the expedition and I don't have any
Cause
titles.
that was one I did not.
I think that comes in hand with the title for that. I believe, so it should be there.
Yeah, I mean. Me personally, I would think they'd be locked in a safe or a vault. That's where I'm gonna be placing all of the ones that I have and find.
It should be fireproof, yes.
Yes, and the ones I found were not placed in there, so that's where I'm gonna be putting it now.
Every day you whisper. Up to the
Hey.
twos.
My voicemail's changed. I haven't done the other thing though, but my voicemail's.
Have you changed the town system?
No,
Like,
not yet.
You need to do that.
Oh, we're starting.
Why is there a voice on there you don't like to hear when you call?
Grind my gears.
They could drive a lot of people's ears.
Completely irrelevant for any of this, but while the three of you are sitting here, I know I have called multiple times about the end of Hunter's Bridge Road at Province Lake Road. Tuesday afternoon, it was opened up, and then Tuesday night, it's still down to one lane coming off of Hunter's Bridge. So if there's any way that that can be jammed into the contractor's head, that needs to be much wider than it is, because at some point, somebody's gonna get hit there. As a very close resident to that intersection, I would definitely appreciate that.
I will give props to the contractor, after the last,
Today.
yeah, after the last storm, I went to the station and he had only done one path out to the back. He didn't realize that the back garage door is actually in use. So we talked about clearing the whole thing, and I plowed it myself, and I said, this is kind of what we're looking to have, and he was great about it. He was really receptive. He said, I had no idea, I apologize, and he did take care of it after that for the remainder of the storm, so props to him for that.
Did you do the entire parking lot over there with somebody else?
I think from what I was told at the beginning of the storm, it was only the loop. And then I think he was told that it was parking spaces too, and whoever it was drove right through. And made parking spaces.
Well, I plowed out some of it in the front.
Right, but
Wait,
we got another storm after that.
Yeah.
Tuesday night, so when I got here Tuesday, I opened up some more of the parking that was still available. And then, and I even plowed next to Leo's truck,
Yeah, on both sides.
and and that's not plowed now, but I see the entire parking spaces are plowed, so I didn't know if our contractor did that, or you did that, I didn't do it.
I didn't.
Cause I called them, and I asked him, I said, you gotta do all the parking spaces, so.
I wasn't.
I just wanna know when we have a conversation about like Hunter's Bridge Road. You know,
Yeah.
that we're moving forward and we're getting that.
I wasn't here when the parking spaces were opened up. I know Elliot did come here and he was pushing the baking back. Wednesday.
Yeah.
But he didn't do it at that time because we're already parking, it's already taken care of.
So,
Can we get back to the fire truck then?
Sorry, I didn't mean to change the subject.
Well, yeah, we get sidetracked very easily. We see something shiny.
Oh, look, it's
somebody
Laura.
says something, right?
It's all relative, this is a public safety thing, he does firefighters, so.
Can I
No,
throw-
but we were here to discuss the fire truck. so-
Can I throw one more thing out there? And I promise I'm done.
Work session For the board of selectmen, so.
Can we just make sure they do keep the boat launch clear? So that we can get down to the water to fill.
Yeah.
I'm done. Promise.
the Pine
He
River,
didn't plow that parking lot, he just made a couple passes down there.
what about Pine River, is that clear?
I haven't been down there.
Yes.
Okay.
And I did have that conversation. So.
Okay.
That one was clear, that was not cleared sufficiently, I did pass it along to Hunter's Bridge Road and Eric Jones's concerns. Even though I think that those are unfounded, but that's beside the point.
Thank you.
Moving on.
You got the smallest road. It's the biggest.
So you're looking at. Okay.
You got anything more to add, Dave?
Well, it's just the amount, obviously, it should be engine two,
Correct.
on
Yeah.
there. It shouldn't say pumper.
Yeah, tanker.
So, yeah, I mean, just say engine two, I guess, in the verbiage. And, it's just a suggestion and description that we add a little bit more verbiage to say a detailed RFP will be provided to the select board before any contract is approved.
Great.
That's what's in the description. And then it's just amount, basically, JT, what I drafted out, well, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of, and I use 250 because that's what you said. To refurbish engine two. The sum of no greater than 250 is to come from the capital reserve fund. Fire truck and equipment. No amount to be raised from taxation, it's a special warrant article, majority vote is required. And then it's got a description underneath it that just says this appropriation will repair. Engine two, I'm gonna fix that. And extend the lifespan 15 to 20 years, I should probably say approximately.
Should we change that instead of repair, refurbish and equip?
would allow refurbish of engine two.
And equip, I would add the verbiage so that if we do have the leftovers, we can buy the equipment we talked about.
But
Obviously, that would need to be approved by the board, but.
I think you can get the equipment anytime you want.
Yeah, probably.
Just
Well, I just want to be clear about where the money would go if it's,
Yeah.
you know.
because we're talking about just a refurb of this. If you wanted extra to do,
So the equipment that'll go on it, so for example, it's got a deck gun, which is the turret on the top. As we're converting that to a side mount pump, there's really no good access to get up there. So like one of the things is that'll be electric. The new one will be electric, so it raises up on its own instead of having a guy climb up. It would get rid of all of our safety issues if we're now having someone scale the side of the truck to do that. So like there's equipment like that. It's not,
Right, but that could, because we're refurbishing the truck and changing the layout of it, that would, even though that's an equipment, that's still part of the refurbish, so that would fall underneath the refurbish 250.
okay, if
See what
you
I'm
feel
saying?
good with that, I just wanted to be crystal clear what we're doing.
And then the equipment would be nozzles, paint tools, things of that nature.
and
Okay,
if you
so
take
good.
it out of the capital reserve, you have to have an amount with an estimate. I mean, an invoice.
Yeah.
And then they have to approve it to take it from the capital reserve. Then it goes to the trustees to approve the check to come back to the town to take it out. That's just a.
Yep.
You know, you may have already been through that, JT, but I just wanted to refresh you that how you wanted to take it out of that.
And how are we gonna have the 250 in the capital reserve?
We will after the town meeting. We'll have
If they approve.
255, 900. After if their town approves what we've already both approved.
Can you
And then-
configure the question so we fund the reserve first and then ask this question? Is that doable?
Do you remember what number this number would be? I mean, because we had a number already for the ETF, CRF for the fire truck.
The first question to be asked in town meeting is, you know, do you approve adding this amount to the
I wanna
trust
say
fund?
21.
And then later, we ask about the
Would
refund.
be the article number.
Then we'll have an idea if it was approved or not.
Oh, you're talking about the one that's on that one, yeah, that one.
Yeah,
would be
so
the-
that's one of the first ones you have coming up, number 5 is a fire truck fund. And this one would be
This one
going
would
into the
be
20.
20 or
Oh,
21.
yeah, so
So that
it's already in that order.
They work out, and then it's just us remembering that if it doesn't, which I don't think that's even a possibility, but I mean, you gotta be prepared for anything, who knows the town meeting? $1 friggin' fund can talk us for an hour, we all know that, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Try to forget that.
So, I'm good presenting whatever you guys approve.
You gotta approve what Dave just said.
I do, we just need to type, I mean, I think that. As far as the article goes, it should be the same across the board, so. Are we ever referring it to as pumper, or can we just stick with engine two?
Engine
I'm
two.
just gonna leave it as engine.
Engine two, and then in the final one, neath the description, even though that's not part of the article, it should just say engine two instead of pumper.
Yeah, and refurb instead of repair, Chris. And then add in after span approximately 15 to 20 years. And then I'd add in another sentence at the end. Saying that a detailed RFP will be provided to the select board before any contract is approved.
Right.
That way the townspeople will know. We've got estimates, we're gonna have a detailed one for you guys to approve the amounts. Then also give you a note to say, well, we're over 250, we're not gonna approve it.
Or we can approve portions of it.
But it's up to you.
You good with that, Will?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless I got a detail.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Move the second and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
For the 250K, right, Lenny?
yeah. Just change the verbiage and. You know, truck. Engine two, and get it all over the-
You'll have this for Tuesday night,
Yep.
updated.
Go home tonight and I'll update it, the email and all the new, I get everything ready to go out with the email, I'm waiting just for this. Before I gotta fix this, attach it, all that email, and then I'll send it out to everybody. So you have everything for the meeting, this is the only thing that was waiting.
You good?
I'm good, thank you. All set, yeah? You have any questions or anything?
No.
Thanks for coming,
Yeah, you're welcome.
JT.
The truck's outside if you guys wanna take a look. It's here.
Oh, you must have brought it. I'm like, how the hell is it? But I realized you came in after I did, so.
Self-driving, that's the other new upgrade.
Well, it wasn't out there when I came in, that's like, what is it? How did you get it?
We're gonna add stealth mode to it further.
Do we have any other good? Cause I like to think, look at.
Oh, go ahead.
I did.
Yeah.
I do have one afterwards that would be considered non-public.
Okay, give me a minute.
Oh, yeah, no, I just wanted to remind if we get.
I do want to get out on the road.